menopause is such a buzzword, and it's almost, well, I feel anyway, it's almost like fashionable now, whereas when I was banging on about it a few years ago, it certainly wasn't. How do you think businesses build supporting women going through menopause into their DNA? What can organisations here learn?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like most other inclusion agendas, which is get allies, Lee, round of applause, thank you. Educate, so Saska, your business, absolutely fantastic. And then you just got to break the taboo. So I know you say it's fashionable and talking about it. I mean, I went to an event a few years ago on menopause. We were talking about the fact that people are so uncomfortable with the word and the connotation because it's about age, it's about bleeding, it's about not bleeding, it's only about women, that they said you have to say menopause 10 times a day in order to get comfortable with it, especially men in the room.
You dropped the M-bomb.
Yes. So 10 times a day, just repeat to myself, menopause, menopause, menopause. We've just got to get comfortable with it and say that support matters and that people can talk about it and create safe spaces for colleagues to share their experiences and help each other.
So I suppose maybe this is a good time for a poll. If I dare, if you're going through perimenopause or menopause at the moment, would you feel comfortable to talk to your boss about it? So if you can answer that for us, yes or no. And we're gonna do 2 polls here as well. So that's sort of if you're going through those. You can answer it if you want, fellas. Okay, so, I mean, reasonably split there. I mean, look, and maybe that's because of the, maybe our audience in the room. And then the second thing, I'll just give that for a second. Right, okay. So I would say pretty split. I would say I was probably more thinking it would be more erred on the no side. But if we are flipping that, if you're not, you're not going through menopause, but would you be comfortable, and I think this maybe applies to more people in the room, people talking to, like your staff coming to talk to you about what they are going through. So would you be able to conduct a conversation, would be comfortable to talk about it? So let's see what everyone thinks about that. And by the way, there's no right or wrong answer here. It's just getting your opinions. Okay, again, flipped probably what I would think. And Lee's nodding with me because I'm going to come to you next to talk about how we get comfortable with the uncomfortable. How, because this is difficult for a guy like you and I met at a breakfast and I made a beeline for you because sort of stood out, funnily enough, at a menopause breakfast. Yeah. So I zoomed over to you to say, what are you doing here?
Yeah, and I think that from my perspective, obviously, a big part of men starting to get comfortable with the conversation is the acceptance that it directly impacts 51% of the population, but it indirectly impacts everybody. And whether that's in the workplace, whether that's at home, whether that's with family, friends, colleagues, there's always someone within your circle who is probably going through significant challenges with the symptoms at this moment in time. And obviously for men, they don't have a representative aspect, but men do have hormones as well. And I think that so often for men, it's actually starting to become a little bit more conscious of what people are going through around them. An opportunity to learn and educate themselves and not always expect women to be the ones educating them. To really stop looking at it as this woman's issue. It kind of intersects with a lot of other challenges quite often around women, suffering ageism and the invisibility that it intersects with, usually at the age around perimenopause. So from that male perspective, there's numerous reasons, whether you want to become a better leader, a better husband, whether you want to actually start to think about how you can support the people around you. It's all part of that wider agenda about starting to become more self-aware of the things that other people might be going through. And even though men don't have a direct context, there is a lot of considerations that they need to start to think about, especially given, women in the workplace are incredibly talented, highly competent, and quite often businesses are losing them because of a lack of support. And from the many women that I've spoken to over the years, they don't want massive systemic change. They don't want spotlighting. What they want is a little bit of support, a little bit of compassion, and a few minor things adjusting to make their working and everyday lives better. And men can play a significant part in that.
And can I just say, I think it's really important as well to remember that women now with life expectancy spend more of their life menopausal than they do reproductively.
Yeah, correct.
And the support for women in the workplace around being reproductive is brilliant in most organisations, and actually for men as well. But the sort of, post that, it just, in most places drops off a cliff.
Totally, and we've, we look at, in lots of my younger career, the whole thing around returning after maternity and making sure we support people. But I suppose for that, there's a lot of talk around what policies maybe should look like. I mean, do you have a policy at Aviva?
We have policies to support people for who need leave. I think what we have in Aviva that's most important actually is back to what we talked about at the beginning. So we offer support through an app called Peppy, which gives kind of online support, but also one-to-one counselling, because I think the health service really struggles to support in this space. And certainly, my advice to girlfriends when they come to me and say, I've been to my GP and I haven't had much support is, okay, you need to go back and get really cross, because that's right, that's not okay. Tell them your hormones are, So I think the sort of education and support is really important. And actually, one of the things we did with Peppy is that we extended the service to partners, so that actually it's not just the individual, that as a partner you can understand what your female partner's going through. And then I think it's just talking about it to get rid of the stigma. So we have a menopause discussion group at work, and I attended and shared my story. I mean, I have to say, I sometimes feel like a bit of a fraud. I have been one of the women who is reasonably lucky, but I appreciate that lots of people aren't, and it's my responsibility to be an ally for people who have a really tough time with it.
I do have a tough time. Saska, you and I have met quite a few times, and we're both quite big advocates of HRT. Because it is, quite frankly, if you get it right, it's wonderful. I feel 35 now, despite not looking it. But there's also, like, I suppose, the holistic view. It's not a magic bullet. What do you think? Women in, how do we power through and make sure we can still perform in midlife?
I think it's really important that we recognise that every single woman's menopause is different, and there is no one solution, and also that we mustn't be finger waggy about HRT or never drink again. Every woman will have her own approach to it. What's really key, and we've all touched on it, is education, so that women know exactly what's going on at this time of life, exactly how they can look after themselves a bit better. I mean, it is true, wine is not your friend once you hit perimenopause, sadly.
Still my friend.
It's still my friend.
Still one of my close friends.
It's not my friend.
It's my best mate.
It's not my friend at 3 a.m. when I wake up with hot legs and alkanoia. But it's about finding a solution that works for you, but also taking responsibility. And, we say this a lot to the women in our community. Know what you are wanting before you go to your GP, because your GP may not be great on this topic. So go having educated yourself, understand what all the symptoms are, understand what all the possible solutions are. Yes, HRT is one option. It will have to be prized out of my hands. I am never coming off it.
Ditto.
But not every woman can, and also not every woman chooses to. So I think it's understanding that health and well-being holistically are really, really important.
Because it's nutrition, isn't it? And it's sleep.
Nutrition is key, sleep, and that will help with sleep. Exercise is key. But it's almost an opportunity, I think, when you come into the perimenopause years, to really do a little bit of an MOT on your lifestyle and your health, and you've maybe been thinking about exercise for a long time. Now is the time to start. So I think we have to take responsibility as women going through this. it's not just about expecting everyone else to support us.
And it can last a long time, right? I mean, mine's lasted like 10 years.
All the symptoms, I mean, I don't know if everyone, like the definitions are, menopause is just one moment in time. It's just 12 months since your last period. So you are perimenopausal, the storm before the calm, from average age is 45 in the UK. Average age of that menopause moment is 51. And then for some women, the symptoms carry on into their 60s and 70s.
Yes, exactly, which is why you can stay on it
Stay on
forever.
HRT forever.
We're getting it. I'm definitely. We've got a couple of questions that are coming in actually from our audience. So really, thank you for that. And I don't know who. I mean, I kind of feel, Danny, this is going to automatically come to you. But the biggest things that organisations can do. So we talked a bit about support, but I think it is support, but also probably training, right?
Yeah, I think. For leaders, I think they just need awareness. I mean, I would expect leaders on challenges for their employees, whether it's mental health, which can actually come with the menopause, or, physical health issues, or just the menopause, or brain fog, or it's too hot in here for me. Can I have a fan at my desk? I would expect them, I think organisations need to equip leaders to kind of triage. Because what you don't want is a leader thinking, I'm a mental health advisor, I'm a menopause advisor. So there's something about having the infrastructure and the support available and making sure that leaders know where to point people, but that they go, thank you for telling me. I want to help you. How would you feel if a colleague came to you and said, I'm diabetic and therefore I need to have breaks in meetings, I need to keep an eye on my blood sugar, I need to drink plenty of fluid, I need to look after myself. You'd go, absolutely, I can support you. A woman comes to you and says, I'm menopausal, and it's like, I think for lots of people it's scary, but it's like many things. As leaders, you have to remember it's much worse for the person who's telling you. We have given you people to look after. That comes with responsibility. Please use it wisely and be kind and supportive, and just listen, actually, and then go away and see what you can do to help.
It's the listen, isn't it? Because
Yep.
it's, I think, women in perimenopause, I know I had crippling anxiety, and like I said in the film, I thought I had early onset dementia. So obviously it does affect people's. My symptoms definitely were mostly mental health symptoms, actually, rather than anything physical. So it's like to your point, it's not necessarily something you can see, is it?
No.
Another question that we've got from your audience. So to be able to talk about menopause, we have to get comfortable talking about ageing. I mean, that's a great one, so thank you for that. So what can companies do to tackle ageism in the workforce? So Lee, have you got any nuggets, and anyone can jump in on this one?
Yeah, so I definitely think it's kind of looking at where, from a company's perspective, wellbeing and inclusion intersect. There's potential there to look at the considerations around the fact that, within organisations there are age's challenges, and it's not often looked at in the wider diversity, inclusion and equity agendas. Naturally, a wellbeing strategy, given that the menopause itself is guaranteed for a significant portion of the workforce to be impacted directly, it needs to be part of that wider strategy. But like Danny just alluded to, there also needs to be the space created for people to be listened to, for some removal of some of that judgment. And as well, to destigmatise it, it needs to become normalised in conversation. There needs to be more around it, both from a communication perspective, also the potential for training and support, but also from that, that leadership perspective of modelling. And, what I've found with the organisations that I've worked with is that case studies are really powerful when someone is willing to share their journey. It's very, very powerful for engaging men if there's a male case study who shares how they've potentially supported their partner or a colleague, and it really ignites curiosity in other men. But the wider piece around ageism in the workplace, we do need to look at that. It presents a whole set of challenges, and workplaces are losing the most experienced, the most capable, and often the most skilled people because they've not really put anything in place to look at the ageist challenges that their employees might be facing.
Yeah, and I mean the whole be educated for kind of 16 to 20 years, work for 40 years, and then retire for 20 years isn't going to work.
Go on a cruise.
That is not going to work. So and there's this massive talent pool of really experienced people, as you say. I mean, I think certainly at Aviva, and I can take no credit for this because it was set up when I joined, our inclusion communities, we actually have one called Generations, which looks at age across the organisation. I would really encourage, other businesses to do the same, to not just think about inclusion in terms of gender, sexuality, that actually there are, so we have a carers community, and we have Generations. I would really encourage organisations to do that, because this sort of, the stigma of the age, along with it just being females, is just not helpful.
Just one more thing though on the ageism piece. Can we educate every single photo editor at national newspapers that when they run a menopause story, not to run a picture of an exhausted woman?
There was crying on a bench. Was that the one
look it up, right?
There was one this week in, I won't name names, but it begins with G and ends in Ardian. And it was a story on menopausal women, and it was a picture of a woman weeping on a park bench. I mean,
that was me.
Who has So I think there is an ageist attitude towards menopause, that it is, you are past your sell-by date, you are, done with life. It's simply not true. It's J-Lo at the Super Bowl, for heaven's sake. That's the menopausal age woman. So get with the programme.
52 and smashing it. Yeah. So right. And ageism actually is. So whoever put that question on, that was a great question, because we probably don't talk about that as much as we should, and it does sit in the same bracket, because I think lots of women have come to me and said to me over the years, I don't want to talk about my menopause to my boss, because then I'm saying I'm old, and therefore then I might lose my job. And no matter how much you reassure people to say, actually, you should really own it.
Also, sorry, I could bang on about this one for a while, but I think it's why our generation has such a responsibility to the next generation of women coming through, that we reinvent how this stage of life is viewed, so that they're not coming towards it thinking, oh God, ageism and all of that will hit me at that point. We have to change the dialogue.
Yeah.
I'm getting lots of more questions as well from the audience, which is great. Any suggestions on how to bring up the menopause discussion with a boss? Anybody want to take that one from me?
Do you want me to have a go?
Go on.
You're the expert.
Well, I tend to be advising the leaders, but actually, I think, if you go to somebody and say, I need your help, that is your start point. There are very few humans in this world who will not go, of course, how can I help you? And then you have the conversation. Just, I need your help. Because what you're going to say, actually, while it might be a real issue for you, is because you say that to your boss, they're like, uh-oh, incoming. Oh, okay, well, we can, I can help you with this. So I would just start with, I need your help.
Yeah.
It's the best way to start that.
It does quite often put bosses into a support mindset. So they then start to think about, potential ways that they could support you before you've even broached the topic. And it just, again, gives an opportunity for you to, showcase a little bit of vulnerability at that point. And again, like Danny says, very few humans are going to repel you at that point.
I think it's the whole comfortable thing as well. The uncomfortable we were talking about is for, some training for leaders, I suppose, at, having them conversations. It's very tricky, I think, as well. And I don't know what anyone, and this is particularly really probably for you two ladies, if somebody, when you were going through your perimenopause, and maybe before you maybe identified with it, if somebody had said to you, you're a bit angry. I was very angry. Are you going through perimenopause? Would you, I potentially might have hit somebody in the face.
I think I would have possibly.
So maybe we're sometimes a part of the problem as well.
Well, I think that's a key point, because I had terrible anxiety and I had no idea that it was perimenopause, despite the fact that I'd worked in women's publishing for 25 years. So actually, if I had had a boss who was educated in it and knew what was going on and recognised that me as a 49-year-old woman suddenly losing confidence and sobbing in the loo more times than is healthy, I would have actually loved it if they'd recognised that and been able to start that conversation. It would have saved me 2 years of thinking that I was terrible at my job.
It is a really, I might punch someone as well, same thing.
I didn't have the anger, I had the weeping and the daily feelings of doom.
But it's that, it's that thing of hormones and the female, that if someone had asked you 20 years ago if you were premenstrual, you probably would have thought that was pretty invasive, right, and inappropriate as a question. Mm-hmm. I think certainly what I would have been comfortable with is, are you okay you don't seem yourself?
Oh.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, which is a really easy way to open that conversation, isn't it? Rather than actually, worry that you're upsetting somebody by, and it's a shame that also that women still think that maybe being labelled as perimenopausal is not a good thing.
Yeah, it's a real challenge because you get different perspectives on being willing to disclose to certain people based on prior interactions. And again, we need to normalise it so it's easier to disclose, but at the same time appreciating that, for some women, they've been invalidated in the medical system, they've been invalidated at work, they spent, potentially a lot of the careers climbing a lot of barriers and obstacles. And quite often, the women that I meet, they've also got caring responsibilities upwards and downwards, and they're managing so many different aspects. And really, they don't want to be judged at that point. They're already doing so much. It just comes down to, like Danny said, instead of men sometimes going, "Oh, is it menopause, love?" It's just a simple reality where actually you broach it with a bit of curiosity, a little bit of consideration to notice, and sometimes be the one who can spot the early signals of someone who you work with on a regular basis, just changing slightly, and then just asking that question with curiosity, creating the space to listen and not jump into assumptions and judgments, because that can be as damaging as some of the symptoms itself.
And I suppose if you're in a relationship, it's the same there, isn't it? Sometimes those you're closest to, and particularly if you're suffering from rage, I think like what I did, my poor husband went through a reasonable amount, but it's encouraging them to ask the right questions as well, isn't it, about what's maybe wrong. We know that the biggest demographic of divorce actually is for women going through perimenopause, instigated, I suppose, by sometimes women going through perimenopause.
Well, we will never beat the taboo unless men feel comfortable being in on the conversation as well. Yeah. It's, it has to be everyone talking about this.
Totally. And one of the last questions we've got from the audience is kind of talking about that, about having the broader conversation, but also bringing in, periods and fertility and menopause in one thing. And because I suppose because we certainly, like you said, certainly when I worked in a trading floor when I was in my 20s and 30s, that would have been bandished around a bit if there was a bit of an angry woman. Some trader might have said, another trader, male trader, might have said, she's on a period, or words to that effect. I won't actually probably repeat what would have been said. That's the polite version. That's not okay. It's not okay to say it. So how do we, I suppose, get rid of that stigma? Do we just need to talk more?
I think we need to talk more. I think also we just need to acknowledge that some women will be incredibly private about all of this. So there are some women listening to this going,
cringe.
I can imagine nothing worse than, somebody
Every woman's different.
Yes,
Every
exactly. Which is so, are you okay? You don't see, how can I support you? But know that the resource, the support is there, and there is no taboo. It's a conversation you can have, and you can ask for help.
So I think just to wrap up, thank you for so much interaction from the audience. Is there maybe one takeaway that we can give to our audience and our people watching on live today from, maybe if I start at you, Lee, just one little nugget you want to give everyone to take away?
Yeah, so it's about that kind of curious support, creating a space to listen and attaching it to well-being and inclusion, because it's important to be able to embed it within the workplace, normalise those conversations.
Saska?
Educate yourself, understand what's going on with your health, and then take the brakes off midlife, because it is a brilliant time of life. Don't let
And don't drink wine, you said.
Maybe don't drink wine.
Don't listen to her. Sorry, Danny.
Everything they said. So I'm going to add one on, which is if you are impacted by perimenopause, menopause, go and insist on the support that you need. Go and insist. Do not tolerate, well, you seem fine, take a herbal remedy. if HRT is for you, if you can take it, insist. You deserve and need the support. Do not be fobbed off.